You are standing on the wall of your city. The bronze gates below you, gates that took your grandfather's generation 3 years to cast, are burning. The smell reaches you first. Not wood smoke, but something organic. Hair, wool, human fat rendering in the afternoon heat. You've been watching the Assyrian camp for 11 days. Every morning, the same ritual. A man, sometimes a woman, once a child no older than your son, is brought to the center of the camp. 4 stakes, ropes at the wrists and ankles, then the flaying begins. But here's what the histories won't tell you. They don't kill them first. The Assyrian soldiers work from the extremities inward. Fingers, toes. The screaming lasts approximately 40 minutes before shock sets in. You know this because you've been counting. You've been forced to watch. That's the point. And when they're done, when the skin comes off in one piece like a tunic, they don't bury it. They cure it. They stretch it. And tomorrow morning, when you look at the siege walls surrounding your city, you'll see it hanging there like a banner, like a flag, like an advertisement. Your name is Shalmanu. You are a grain merchant. You have 3 children. In approximately 6 hours, the gates will fall. And you already know surrender won't save you. This wasn't madness. This was a machine. His name was Ashurnasirpal II, and between 883 and 589 BCE, he turned the Neo-Assyrian Empire into the most efficient terror state the ancient world had ever seen. Not the largest empire, not the richest, the most psychologically advanced. Because here's what they don't teach you in school. Ashurnasirpal didn't invent impalement or flaying. Those techniques were thousands of years old by his time. What he invented was the system, the logistics, the mass production of fear. He turned atrocity into infrastructure. The cuneiform tablets from his reign stored in the British Museum, catalog numbers K1349 and K1350, don't describe battles. They describe inventories. I flayed all the chief men who had revolted, and I covered the pillar with their skins. Some I impaled upon the pillar on stakes, and others I bound to stakes round about the pillar. Notice the language. I covered. Some. Others. This is the grammar of construction, of decoration. He's describing interior design. And if you believe the voices powerful people tried to erase deserve to be heard, if you think the silenced deserve witnesses, subscribe to this channel. Because what I'm about to show you is the blueprint of how empires don't just conquer cities, they conquer minds. Ashurnasirpal II became king at age 23. His father, Tukulti-Ninurta II, died suddenly, possibly poisoned. The records are deliberately vague, and the young prince inherited an empire in rebellion. The Aramean tribes to the west had stopped paying tribute. The mountain kingdoms to the north were raiding border settlements. The provincial governors were sending half the grain they owed. The Assyrian court expected him to negotiate, to compromise, to do what every young king does, buy loyalty with gold and marry into alliances. Instead, Ashurnasirpal spent his first year in power studying his father's archives, specifically the reports from the failed campaigns, the sieges that dragged on for months, the rebels who surrendered, paid tribute, then revolted again 3 years later. He identified the problem: deterrence decay. A city watches its neighbor get sacked, feels fear, pays tribute for a decade. Then a new generation grows up who didn't witness the original conquest. The fear fades. The rebellion begins again. The cycle repeats. Ashurnasirpal realized that violence wasn't the issue, memory was the issue. So he designed a solution. He would create violence so extreme, so visceral, so permanently documented that it would be transmitted across generations like a genetic disease. He would build monuments out of human beings. He would turn cities into case studies. He would make fear immortal. The first test was the city of Suru. Suru was a walled city in the Habur River Valley. Population approximately 5,000. Crime, late tribute payments, and harboring Aramean refugees. The siege lasted 8 days. When the gates opened, not from assault but from starvation,
Ashurnasirpal did not accept surrender. From the royal annals, translated from the Nimrud inscription, I built a pillar over against the city gate, and I flayed all the chief men who had revolted, and I covered the pillar with their skins. Some I walled up within the pillar, some I impaled upon the pillar on stakes. Let's parse this like a technical document. Step 1. Classification. The population was divided into categories: chief men, soldiers, civilians, children. This wasn't rage, this was triage. Step 2. Processing. The flaying was performed by specialized units, soldiers trained specifically in the technique, not random violence, skilled labor. The Assyrian military had a division for psychological warfare the way modern armies have a communications corps. Step 3. Display. The skins were cured using cedar oil and salt. They were stretched on wooden frames. The frames were mounted on a stone pillar built specifically for this purpose, positioned at the city gate where travelers would see it for decades. Step 4. Documentation. Scribes recorded everything: the number of victims, the specific crimes, the techniques used. This documentation was copied and distributed to every provincial governor in the empire. Why? Because Ashurnasirpal wasn't communicating with Suru. Suru was dead. He was communicating with the next city and the one after that. The pillar stood for 60 years. Travelers passing through the Habur Valley would detour for miles to avoid seeing it. Mothers would tell their children about it. It became mythology while still standing as architecture. This was the prototype, the beta test, and it worked so efficiently that Ashurnasirpal spent the next 24 years scaling the model across the entire empire. By year 5 of his reign, Ashurnasirpal had refined the system. The city of Tela rebelled, not because of oppression, but because a new governor tried to standardize grain taxation, a bureaucratic dispute. The response was not proportional, it was exponential. The Assyrian army arrived with prefabricated siege equipment, walls with hooks designed specifically for displaying bodies, wooden stakes pre-cut to standard lengths for impalement, clay tablets with the official documentation template already drafted waiting only for the casualty count to be filled in. When Tela fell, Ashurnasirpal executed the governor and his family. But here's the detail the histories omit. He didn't kill them quickly. The governor was flayed alive in the city square. His wife and daughters were impaled on stakes arranged in height order, a visual gradient. His sons were blinded with hot copper rods and released to wander the countryside as messengers. And then came the innovation. Ashurnasirpal ordered his men to stretch the governor's skin across the city's main gate like a curtain. Visitors entering Tela would literally pass through his flesh to enter the city. The psychological impact was calculated down to the neurological level. Every person passing through that gate experienced a physical violation of the boundary between human and object, between person and material. The gate forced you to acknowledge that a human being had been transformed into architecture. This is what modern psychologists call desecration trauma, the deliberate destruction of the categories that make us human. It doesn't just create fear, it creates existential terror. It makes you question whether humanity itself is a permanent category or just a temporary designation. Tela paid tribute for 127 years without a single rebellion. But the true genius of Ashurnasirpal's system wasn't the violence itself, it was the distribution network.
He didn't just commit atrocities, he advertised them. Every city in the empire received official dispatches, clay tablets with detailed descriptions of what happened to rebels. These weren't threats, they were case studies, technical manuals. The tablets included diagrams, measurements, timelines. One tablet excavated from Kalhu includes this passage: "The men who had rebelled I impaled on stakes. The young men and maidens I burned in the fire. I cut off the hands of the soldiers who carried weapons. I built a tower with their heads." Notice the structure: categorical list, specific techniques, architectural metaphor. This reads like a project completion report. But here's where it gets darker. Ashurnasirpal understood decay. Physical monuments erode, stone weathers, pillars fall. So he built a redundancy system.
He created traveling exhibitions. Prisoners from defeated cities were kept alive specifically to be paraded through other cities as living warnings. They were marked, brands, amputations, deliberate scars, so their origin was always visible. These prisoners became walking billboards, human proof-of-concept demonstrations. The city of Damdamusa rebelled in year 16 of Ashurnasirpal's reign. When it fell, he didn't execute everyone. He selected 600 men, removed their right hands and left ears, branded their foreheads with the city's name in cuneiform, and sent them as tribute to neighboring kingdoms. Those men lived for decades. They had children. Those children grew up seeing their father's mutilations every day. The trauma was multi-generational. The fear became inherited. Here's what they don't tell you in textbooks. This system almost never required actual use after the first decade. By year 15 of Ashurnasirpal's reign, cities were surrendering at the first sight of Assyrian scouts. The mere rumor of an approaching army was enough. Provincial governors were executing potential rebels preemptively to avoid being associated with resistance. The machine had become self-sustaining. Ashurnasirpal's later campaign reports are bureaucratically boring. The city of X surrendered upon our arrival. We accepted tribute of Y amount of grain, Z silver talents. No violence, no atrocities, just logistics. Because the terror was already installed in the population's collective memory, it didn't need to be refreshed. The billboards, literal and metaphorical, were still standing. The British Museum has a relief from Ashurnasirpal's palace at Kalhu. It shows the king standing calmly while scribes count prisoners.
No weapons drawn, no violence depicted, just administration. One of the scribes is literally taking inventory on a clay tablet while prisoners kneel in neat rows. The violence had become so systematized it was clerical work. But there was one city that called the bluff. Hamat, in modern-day Syria, was a major trading hub, wealthy, fortified, confident. When Ashurnasirpal demanded tribute in year 19 of his reign, Hamat refused. The siege lasted 4 months, the longest of Ashurnasirpal's entire campaign record. The walls were 40 feet high, reinforced with copper plates. The city had grain reserves for 2 years. But Ashurnasirpal didn't assault the walls. He waited. And while he waited, he built. Outside Hamat's walls, the Assyrian army constructed a second wall. But this wall wasn't for defense. It was a gallery. Every prisoner captured from raiding parties, farmers, traders, scouts, was executed in view of Hamat's defenders. But not quickly. The executions were staged like performances. Flayings on Monday, impalements on Wednesday, burnings on Friday. The bodies weren't removed, they were arranged. By month 3, the outer wall was completely covered in corpses in various stages of decomposition. The smell was weaponized. Defenders on Hamat's walls were vomiting from the stench. Water sources downwind became contaminated. Hamat surrendered not because of military defeat, but because of psychological collapse. The city council executed its own leadership and opened the gates. Ashurnasirpal's response? He executed no one from Hamat. Instead, he forced the entire population to witness the execution of their own leaders, the men who had advocated surrender, by impalement. Then he conscripted 5,000 men from Hamat into his army. The message? Surrender doesn't save you. Obedience saves you. But only if it's preemptive. Hamat never rebelled again. Neither did any city within 200 miles. Ashurnasirpal II died in 859 BCE at age 47. Cause of death? Unknown. Possibly natural. The empire he built lasted another 250 years. But here's the part they erase from history. His system didn't die with Assyria. The Romans studied Assyrian records.
the crucifixions along the Appian Way after Spartacus's revolt, 6,000 crosses for 120 miles. That's Ashurnasirpal's pillar system scaled up. The Mongols used psychological terror as primary strategy. Genghis Khan's Pyramid of Skulls outside Baghdad, that's straight from the Neo-Assyrian playbook.
Stalin's show trials, Mao's struggle sessions, these aren't medieval holdovers, they're refinements of ancient technology. Because Ashurnasirpal understood something that most historians refuse to acknowledge, terror is infrastructure. Once you build it correctly, it maintains itself. The cuneiform tablets from his palace library are stored in climate-controlled vaults, cataloged, preserved. The British Museum gives them neutral names, administrative records, campaign chronicles. But the people of Suru, Tela, Damda Musa, Hamath, their names exist only as line items in casualty reports. We know how many people died. We don't know who they were. The machine erased them, and then it erased itself from the history books, disguised as mere conquest, as military strategy, as the normal mechanics of ancient empire. But you've seen the blueprint now. You know what it looks like, and if you start paying attention, you'll see its descendants everywhere, in propaganda that doesn't argue but overwhelms, in punishments designed not to correct but to horrify, in systems that don't require enforcement because they've already colonized your imagination. The pillars are gone, the skins have rotted away, but the machine is still running. It's just wearing a better disguise. If you believe these buried truths deserve witnesses, if you think the 5,000 people of Suru deserve to be remembered as more than a footnote in a conqueror's resume, subscribe, because history isn't written by the winners, it's written by the survivors.